back to the Meeple Marathon. Today we're going to learn how to play Above and Below Haunted. Now in this video I'm going to cover all of the rules for playing Haunted. If you are just interested in learning how to play the solo mode, which was included in the Kickstarter, revolves around this deck of cards here. That's going to come at the end of this video. I'll put a timestamp below so you can jump straight to that if that's all you're interested in. Most of this plays incredibly similar to Above and Below the original. There's a few minor tweaks, like when you harvest, you also gain a coin instead of just taking an action to labor and gain a coin. And if you send a laborer to do that, you get to harvest kind of twice. There are a few other things. Obviously, the ghosts are different, but they're pretty easy to wrap your head around and pick up on. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started. The game is already set up. A few things to just cover as part of setup here, and I'm realizing I haven't given myself my 8 money, so that's important here. Everybody's going to start with 8 money, one of these jugs, and 3 starting workers that all have this symbol on the back. You can see that the regular workers are just have kind of a plain nondescript background, but you should have one with a hammer, you should have one with a feather, and one with 2 dice on it. So people are going to look different, but that's what you're starting with. Everybody should also have a single house with just 3 beds in it. That's going to allow your people to rest up after they're worn out at the end of the day and come back ready. You're going to start with your round marker here in the first square. If you want to play a longer game, you can. You would just start with it out there and then move it in into the boxes at the end of the first round. So depends on what you want to do there. Everybody's reputation, either a cube or if you have the stretch goals, sits here in the middle. And then we have some people that we can recruit up here. And then we have a whole bunch of cards. Now, I'm going to go ahead and explain to you the differences between these cards now so that it makes more sense down the road. So the first row I want to highlight is this row right here. These are very low cost cards, and these cards all have a key on the back, but also under the number here. These are key cards, key house cards, and they're important because they're going to help you get started. You only ever start the game with 5. That number actually might change depending on player count, but there's numerous of them in the box. You're going to draw out 5, lay them out, and once they're gone, they are gone. But these are great starter buildings. These are going to be buildings that are going to help you get going, give you a little boost. They're also pretty cheap. That's kind of what you're going to want to focus on at the beginning of the game. You also then have your star buildings, which are up here at the top. These are always going to be the same, and they're always going to be available. You can see, however, that they are very expensive. These cards focus more on end game scoring. These are going to be big points that you're scoring at the end of the game. Anything that you see in this shape here in this color is going to be points that's going to be tallied up at the end of the game. But this one is 10 points, and then an additional 2 for any of these types of resources you have on your player mat, the red fish and the little octopus root. And some of them vary. This one would give you additional up to 11 points if you've made it a certain distance across your resource track there on the bottom, and we'll talk about all that. Then you have your standard buildings here. These are going to vary, be a little bit more expensive, but they're going to give you things like additional beds, resources that you can gather from round to round, boats, additional income from round to round. So they're going to be very important in dealing out your engine. And then you have your outposts. So one of the main themes of the game is that you are living in this area with all these deep underground caverns. As you go exploring those caverns and you kind of add them to your village, the empty caverns, then you can build outposts in those caverns. So you cannot build any of these buildings until you have an empty cavern to build them in. All right. So we have these cavern buildings, or these cavern cards. They all look the same, except you'll notice that the numbers down here on the bottom are different. These are going to coincide with the entries in the storybook here. So when you go exploring, you're going to just take the top card here. You're going to roll a d6, and that's going to tell you what story that you're going to encounter. You're going to encounter that story. Win or lose, you're going to gain this cavern card. It's technically going to go under one of your buildings. You don't have to have a building over top of it, though. You did in original Above and Below, but you don't now. But that's going to give you the ability to then build one of these outposts. So these are just buildings, but they're built underground. Last but not least, this deck of cards over here, which is new to Above and Below Haunted, is a story deck. So sometimes when you go exploring, it's going to reference one of these cards. They're all numbered. You are never to shuffle these up, keep them in order so you can easily find the number you're looking for. And this is very reminiscent to Sleeping Gods. If you've played either of those games from Ryan Lockett, where you kind of take a card and then later on down the road, you're going to probably activate that card by either triggering an event, or it might give you an extra action you can take on your turn, something like that. But you're only going to gain these when told to by exploring. All right, that pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about during setup. So in Above and Below, your objective is to build out the best town, the village, both above the ground and below the ground, down in the caverns, hence Above and Below. You're going to do this by scoring points from your buildings, also scoring points for discovering new ingredients. You're going to gain points for resources you've collected throughout the game. So basically this is a kind of a point salad type game. There's lots of different ways you can score points, lots of different strategies you can take to building out the best village, but basically it's a little bit of a tableau builder at the same time where you are also bringing in workers. And it's not really a worker placement game because everything is placed on your board. It's more of an action selection game. On your turn, you are going to take one or more of your workers and you're going to move them over here to the exhausted area, the area with the moon. You're then going to use that or those workers to take these actions listed here, at least one of the actions listed here on the top of your player board. These are go exploring, which you actually have to have 2 workers. We'll come back to that, at least 2 workers. You can build, you can banish, you can hire a new worker, or you can labor. All right. In order to do some of these, you have to have the matching symbol. So you can see here, only workers with the hammer symbol can build. All right, I could not send this girl over here to build. All right, only people with the feather action can hire new workers or banish ghosts. All right, anybody can go exploring, but you need at least 2 people. Nobody should go exploring alone. And anybody can take the labor action, which is where you collect resources off of your buildings and also gain a little money. If you send someone, however, that has a hammer, they can collect 2 resources instead of just 1. Let's take a look at these actions in greater detail now. I'm not going to go in order. I'm going to save exploring for last. Let's start with building. So in this case, we would need to take a worker with the hammer symbol, move him into the exhausted area. The number of pips here does not matter. It only matters for exploring. Then we take our money and we're going to spend our money. If we have an open cavern, we could build an outpost. Otherwise, we're basically just looking at these above ground buildings. More than likely, again, you're probably going to focus on one of these key buildings here. This is my personal favorite building here, so we'll just say that we've built that one. All right, you would turn in the money and it's built. Voila, that is your turn. All right, it would pass to the next player. They would take an action. It would go around the table until it comes back to you. Then you would move another worker over. Let's say you want to hire someone. You move someone over with a feather. All right, we're taking this action here. Then you look up here to the reputation board and you see your available workers. The costs that it takes to hire the worker or pay for their passage to your village is listed below their slots. All right. All the workers on the left are cheaper. They take a quicker route. All right. But it passes through the haunted marshes. And in that case, a ghost is more than likely going to join them or is going to join them. So you can see here that these 3 all cost a feather, 2, 3, and 3 coins respectively, but they bring a ghost with them. These 2 over here cost a little bit more. They're going to take longer to get there. They go around the haunted marsh, All right, so they don't bring a ghost with them, and they actually bring one of these Mystic Brew jugs with them. So you would gain a Mystic Brew. So depends on what you want. Do you want to spend more? Also, you should be looking at the symbols on top of these players here. For example, this guy here, he's a robot. He doesn't need a bed to sleep in. He doesn't need a bed. He doesn't need Mystic Brews. He's always going to be able to come back here to the refresh side after he does work for a day. Or there is a gentleman like this one here who not only allows you to re-roll a die when you go exploring, but on a 6+, or 6, sorry, not a 6+, but on a 6 on that die roll, he's going to get you 3 lanterns. That's how you become successfully exploring. This is a very lucrative guy for exploring here. So kind of think about who you want symbols wise. Also, how much can you afford? Do you want to ghost? Things like that. So we'll hire this robot fella here. When you hire somebody, they come in also exhausted. They're tired from their trip. All right, so they're not ready to work right away. You do not refill this board. At the end of the round, this board, everything's going to shift to the left, and then we'll refill. All right, again, you've taken action. Things are going to pass around back to you. Let's just say, for example, that this worker here is ready to go. The next action I want to discuss is the banish action. All right, again, you have to take somebody with a feather symbol, and when you do so, you get to banish all of the ghosts from your town. Now, why are ghosts bad? They don't mess with your buildings. They don't keep you from using them. They're just haunting them. They're not really demonic ghosts or anything that's going to harm anybody. But people don't want to come to your village if they think it's haunted. So you're going to lose reputation. So at the end of the round, you will lose 1 reputation for every ghost in your village. All right, so it's important to banish them out when they start getting to be too many. A single banish action allows you to banish all of the ghosts in your village, whether it's 1 or 5 or 10, it doesn't matter. You'll take all of them, put them back in the supply except 1. You then get to take that other ghost, and instead of banishing it back to the Haunted Marsh, it actually makes its way over to your neighbor's village. You get to choose where it goes. You might think this is a little bit of a take that element, but remember, you're not blocking off that building for them to use. They're still going to be able to use it. Worst case is they will lose a single reputation at the end of the round. You, however, gain resources from placing that ghost, and that is listed right here on the reputation board. If you place it into a building that has no bed, all right? So for example, if this player had this building here, if I place it there, I get to gain 2 reputation because I didn't haunt anybody's house, and 2 money. If, however, you haunted any building with a bed, you're going to gain 3 money and 1 of these Mystic Brews. We'll talk about their importance here in a minute. Or if you haunt an outpost, so underneath in the below portion of the game, you're going to gain a Mystic Brew and a boat. We're going to talk about the importance of boats here in a little bit too. So that's the banish action. It's not just about getting rid of the ghosts in your village. You're also going to gain resources. So sometimes knowing when to take that banish action to gain the resources you need to either build something or, gain that boat before you go exploring, things like that, is really critical. All right. Again, it's going to circle back around to you. On your turn, maybe you want to labor. Now, I don't have anything personally that I could harvest, but let's just say that this player over here, when they built this building, this symbol here means that when they build it and at the end of every round, if this spot is empty, they're going to place a rice token there. All right. Or for example, let me see if I can find one. I don't see one here, but you might come across a building like this. In this case, there's no arrow, but when you build this building, you're going to put, there's 2 dots. So you're going to take 2 of that resource and you're just going to stack them up right there. Boom, boom. Once those resources are harvested, all right, that building is empty. Okay, so say I put that there. In order to harvest, you can send anybody. You're going to gain a coin no matter what. So I could send this girl here, and be fine. But if I send someone with a hammer, they are able to harvest twice. They still just gain 1 coin, but instead of picking up 1 token and either keeping it or placing it on my board, I get 2. Now, when you take a token, there's 3 things you can do with it. You can save it. Occasionally you'll come across a exploration that might ask you for a resource, sometimes a very specific resource, you never know. You can also place one up here for sale. Somebody else on their turn can buy this from you for 3 or more coins. All right, it can never be cheaper than 3, but you can haggle with people. If multiple people want your resource, you can haggle with them and see what they're willing to give you. Or you can place your resources down here along this bottom track. Now, this bottom track is a way to not only score points at the end of the game, but it also increases your income from round to round. Whichever slot you have filled up, you are going to gain that many coins at the end of the round. So if I have this at the end of the first round, instead of gaining 3 money, I'm going to gain 4. Now, the trick is that you can only have a single item per stack, and you can only have an item in 1 stack. So I could not spread these out. I know I didn't explain that very well just now, but if you place this leafed up package here, any other leafed up packages you claim have to be stacked on top. In order to push further down your resource track here, you would have to gain an entirely new item and then place it there. At the end of the game, you're going to gain points. So the number in the light tan color here, you're going to gain points equal to the number of resources. So in this case, I would gain 2 points because I have 2 of these. But let's just say down the road, I really get into a big crab farm and I gain 1, 2, 3, 4 crabs, and I got a wheat somewhere along the road. In this case, I would gain 2 points here, 1, 2, 1 point for this guy, 2 points for this guy, but my 4 crabs, 1, 2, 3, 4, would each be worth 3 points. So that's 12 points right there. So pretty much when you gain a resource, you want to keep it off to the side. Generally, you're not going to lose them due to anything. And then you can decide when you want to start placing them on the track, but don't wait too long, because remember, round to round, the further you've pushed along here, the bigger your income is. So you don't want to wait until the very end of the game to start putting anything down. All right, but that's the labor action. You're going to gain a coin and you're going to harvest some goods. I'll tell you that anytime you are the first person to discover a resource here, you get to take, that's why we have these cubes here. You get to take one of your resource cubes and claim that resource as being like the, not inventor, but discoverer of this new ingredient. No one else can claim that, and at the end of the game, you get points equal to this number up here. So these 2 goods on the end are worth 4, these 3 are worth 2, and these 3 are worth 1. Last but not least is exploring. In this case, you're going to move at least 2 people over, if not more. You can explore with more. So let's just say we send all 3 of these people here. In this case, I have a potential to gain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lanterns. All right, just by rolling dice, as long as I roll at least a 3 for her, a 3 for him, and a 2 for her. Not bad odds, but my maximum is 5. All right, I could either explore this standard cave, which is going to be pretty much 2 to 6 lanterns to be victorious, so I'm in that range, or I could get gutsy and explore this dangerous cavern. If I'm successful, I gain a pearl on top of whatever else. But you can see that to be successful in this cavern, it's going to be from 5 to 11. I have a maximum of 5. We're not going dangerous yet. We're going to go right here. You would take your cavern card, and in thematic way, you would place it below one of your buildings. You're going to get this card no matter what. All right. You're then going to, just so you don't lose track of them and they don't get mixed in with anybody else you would have moved over here, you're going to place your workers on the card. All right. Before you do that, you probably want to roll. And that tells you which entry in the storybook, in this case 80, you're going to read. All right. I'm not going to read so I don't spoil anything, but it's going to give you a little bit of entry flavor text, and then it's going to give you a choice or a skill check to make. Usually someone to your left or right is reading this for you, but if you're playing by yourself, you just read and you don't read ahead. It's not hard. Once you have decided which skill check you're going to attempt, and it's going to give you usually an explore, the word explore, and then a number. All right, that number is how many lanterns you have to get in order to be successful. Say I find something that says explore 3, okay? I need 3 lanterns to be successful. In this case, you would one by one, you would choose what order these guys are each going to go in. And you say, all right, starting with the robot, boom. All right, he missed. Starting with her here, boom, she got 1. And then starting with her or ending with her, boom. That was a horrible roll on my part. Now, something important to note is my favorite building here. If you have this building, you're going to actually roll your dice all out and then decide, oh, you're going to get this one, you're going to get this one, and you're going to get this one. They're all 3s. But otherwise, you have to decide in what order they're going to explore. You assign them, and then you decide whether you're successful. In this case, we were not. But there are ways to mitigate the dice and mitigate the number of successes. If you have a boat, and you can have multiple boats on your player board, on your turn, you can turn in a boat to change a die to a 6. All right, so say one of these 1s that I rolled very poorly, I could exhaust a boat and turn that into a 6. Say I didn't have any boats available though, and I was 1 lantern short. At any point, instead of returning someone to the exhausted area, you can injure someone, all right, to gain that extra lantern. In this case, I could injure 2 people to gain 2 more lanterns, which is what I needed, all right, without using boats. At the end of the day, that means that these people, even in beds, are only going to become exhausted. They go from injured to exhausted, and you lose them for a round. So decide whether or not it's important to you to be successful in this explorer action, all right? Either way, fail or succeed, it's going to tell you if you earned anything in the storybook. You also gain this card. This card allows you to build outposts in the future, expanding your village both below the ground and above the ground. So that's the explore action. Again, you might be told to pull out one of these cards. It's going to tell you the exact number. It's not going to be random, and the instructions on the card are pretty clear. All right. Once everybody has exhausted or injured all of their characters, and this could be different for everybody around the table. Somebody could spend all 3 of their workers right at the beginning to go exploring, and then they're done. Another person may be hired last round, so they're going to have more workers, and it's going to take them a whole nother round, a whole nother turn to exhaust all their workers. But once everybody has exhausted all their workers, all right, we're going to go through a few things that you have to do at the end of the round. It's quite extensive. First thing is Ghosts Haunt. So remember how we placed a ghost here, and we talked about them losing you reputation at the end of the round? This is when it happens. At the very beginning, you're going to lose reputation for every ghost. Every 1 ghost you have in your village, you lose 1 reputation. All right, next up, you're going to move the round marker over. Nothing else but to keep track of when the end of the game is coming. All right, you're also going to bring in new villagers. All right, in this case, these guys, since we only hired 1, would shift over, and a new one would come in like so. All right, we're also going to rest our villagers. In this case, you need to count up the amount of beds you have. 1, 2, 3. I have 4 beds in my village. All right, that means I can move 4 people 1 space to the left. The robot doesn't need 1, so he's going no matter what. Then I've got 1, 2, 3. Unfortunately, these people cannot use that extra bed to go all the way here. Also, if for some reason I was short, say I had all my people right here, but I did not have this card, and I did not have a robot. Say I had 4 regular people, but only 3 beds. I could move 1, 2, 3 people over. This guy can drink a Mystic Brew, and he is ready to go. So that's the importance of the Mystic Brews. There's also some cards like this one here, this star building, that if you accrue a lot of Mystic Brews and have them on your player board at the end of the game, they're worth 1 point each. All right, so we have rested, we've gained new villagers up here, we've rested our villagers down here. Then we're gonna gather income. I took all these resources off, but say we had gathered 4 things up to this point, we would gain 7 money. All right, plus any additional money like this card would give us an 8th coin to gain at the end of every round. All right, you're gonna refresh any goods on buildings. So all the buildings with this symbol, if this person had harvested that good, they would gain a new one. All right, so they could start stacking their rice up at the end of the round. The ones with the 2 dots do not get refilled. You're gonna pass the first player marker to the next person and start a new round. Once the 7th round, or 8th if you're playing the long game, has completed, everyone's going to count up their points. Pretty much anywhere you see this symbol here, you're going to count up those points. So a lot of them are going to come on your house and outpost cards, especially pay attention to your key cards at the top. You're going to gain resources based on this track down here that we talked about earlier. You're going to gain any bonus points you gained for discovering a ingredient. And last but not least, you're either going to gain or lose points depending on where you are on the reputation track. Also, whoever is highest up here on the reputation track is going to gain an additional 5, 3, and 2, unless you're playing a 2-player game, in which case a single player is just going to gain 3 points, 3 additional points. So not only do you want to be further up the track, but being the furthest along is helpful too. Whoever has the high score wins. Last but not least, we want to talk about how to play solo. So if you have the Kickstarter Stretch Goals box, it includes this magical deck of cards here that's going to allow you to control an AI bot. A few things the bot does not deal in. They do not ever gain or spend money. If they were to buy something from you and they were to owe you money, you simply take it from the supply. They're also never going to be first player. You can play with the bot in a 2-player game and they're the 3rd player, or even a 3-player game and make them the 4th player. They are always going to go after the first player. So whoever has the first player marker, if you're playing true solo, then that's always going to be you. All right. Everything else they are able to gain. They are able to build buildings. All right. They're just not going to pay for them. They're able to gain Mystic Brews, boats, and resources, which we'll talk about how they add them to the board here in just a minute. The Mystic Brews and the boats, you can pretty much just collect off to the side. They're only ever going to be used if the bot purchases, say, a building like this, where they would gain points at the end of the game for things like Mystic Brews. They also don't care about beds. At the end of the day, they're always going to refresh all their workers. Their workers will never become injured. So, and it doesn't matter how many beds they have, their workers always come back. They're almost like all like their robots. Anyways, on a player, or on the bot's turn, you're going to take this deck of cards and you're going to flip over the top card. The top card is always, should be this one where it says first action. The rest of these are all shuffled up. Okay? This one's going to say, all right, depending on the round, what are they going to do? They're either going to train the leftmost villager, draw another bot action card, roll a die, or the final round, they're going to gain a star building worth the most VP for, when they say you, that means the bot. All right. After the first round, oh, and another important thing is at the top here, it tells you how many villagers they need to spend to take this action. So this one is 1. It does not matter to them what symbol they have. Just take one of their workers and move it over. After the first turn for the bot, you're then going to flip over these and it's going to give you various things here. So let's look at some of these examples we have here. This one actually costs 0 villagers, but it's going to tell you to remove the most expensive villager from the reputation board. Dink. if you, being the bot, have a lower reputation than at least one player, gain +1 reputation, and then draw a new bot card and take an action. So that was like them taking a free action. Here, it would be one villager. One villager, does not matter the symbol. Banish all your ghosts and place one on a building owned by the first player. Again, if you're playing solo, that's always you. But basically, you're taking the banish action. Here, you can see it takes 3 villagers. Now, in this case, they only have 1 remaining. But if that situation ever happens, move as many as they have over, basically clearing out all their villagers and still take the action. Here, they're going to explore. Here it says, gain the rewards from the choice with the highest explore number. Sometimes it's going to say with the lowest explore number. That's going to be the amount of successes you need in the storybook. So remember earlier we were talking about how maybe it's an explore 3 action or an explore 5 action. In this case, you would have them complete, be automatically successful in the explore 5 action. They would gain the rewards from that, minus coins. You don't need to read the flavor text, that way you're not spoiling it for yourself, but you do need to read the rewards. All right, and then that card goes away. When a round ends, the round's going to end when the bot is out of players, just like you, so the bot may continue taking turns longer than you if they have more villagers, but they're always going to get their villagers back, and they're always going to take this first action card and put it back on top. You could flip it over like this if you really want to, but this card is always going to go like that. I found it very helpful in my games to, after I took that first turn, to take this card and put it right here, and then I had like my discard pile over here somewhere. And so then during round setup or end of round setup, I would take this and just flip it back on top. So it was always there to remind me when I was looking at the deck to flip it back over. That's pretty much it. The bot is, again, they're going to sometimes purchase goods off of your player mat. They're sometimes going to banish ghosts to you. You do always get to pick what building the ghost goes in. Mainly, you get to decide what kind of resources they gain. They are going to go exploring. They are going to purchase buildings. They're going to find resources. They're going to take mainly the same actions you are throughout the game. All right. The biggest difference with their resources is that they're going to keep all their resources off to the side. Remember, they don't care about income. They don't work in money. But at the end of the game, they're going to take, say they have collected these resources here, like so. All right. They've gained a ton of wheat. Okay. They're going to say, all right, they've got 1 clam, 2 dragon fruit, and what is that, 4 wheat. They would simply place the 1 clam there, the 2 dragon fruit next, and the wheat there. All right, they're basically just maximizing their points at the end of the game. But that's it. You simply, on a bot's turn, flip over a card, take the action, move over villagers. Make sure you do that so you're not giving them extra turns at the end of the game. And you continue doing that until they're out of villagers. And then when you're out of villagers, you move on to the next round. Simple as that. These cards are very instructive as to tell you pretty much which worker to hire, which card to buy, whether it's the cheapest one, or maybe it's the most expensive key card, or maybe it's the most expensive star card, but only if it's the 7th round, or an outpost if they have a cave. So they really kind of covered all the bases. I did not find any instances where I was like not sure what the bot should do or had to make a really big decision for the bot. Most of the time the instructions on these cards worked, so well done there. Just always remember, I covered it up. Always remember to take that first action card and make sure it's the top one, that's the card they're going to draw their first turn of each round. Other than that, we are good to go. I'm just realizing now that I failed to mention these pearls here. I mentioned them briefly. You would gain them if you're successful in exploring a dangerous cave. Pearls don't really do much, except at the end of the game, you stack them onto whatever pile is furthest along. So you are multiplying that good, which is worth the most value. You're just adding to it. So these become like a wild resource that you can then place down at the end of the game. Not sure really the whole thematic nature of the pearls, other than, you know, that you're finding them in the dangerous caves, but that's neither here nor there. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know in the comment section below. I'm going to be doing a review video on this game coming up soon here on the channel, and I'm going to cover heavily the differences between this version of Above and Below and the original Above and Below, but also give you my thoughts on this game, whether or not this would be one you would want to purchase, whether this is your first Above and Below purchase, or you have the original. So stay tuned for that if that's something you're interested in. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Have a great day.